Hi everyone. This post is about those people who are currently in their life either due to COVID or due to any other illnesses or due to their personal life challenges. Um, there are people currently on earth who are either going through severe health crisis or moderate health crisis where their health is forcing them to re-evaluate their life, or they are going into burnout or fatigue stages. Now, burnout is something you can research online. I will post a couple of links about it as well that I have written on this topic. And burnout is something which causes people to feel very physically exhausted in their normal, natural activities that they have been pursuing in life, in their personal life, professional life, or both. I faced severe burnout when I was in my mid 30s, and part of my burnout was from emotional reasons, part was from physical health impacting factors, and then the final thing that clicked for me was it was related to job related dissatisfaction and pursuit of something that I shouldn't pursue. So these are the four reasons for me that led to some of my burnout stages. And other than that, I've also faced a lot of financial ups and down stages in my life. Currently, I'm not working and I voluntarily chose not to work, but each of the things that are normalized in our life, like having a job. If you're single, you definitely should have a job. If you are married, you should have a job. If you have kids and dependents, you need to have a job. You need to have an active income in order to sustain a certain particular type of lifestyle on earth. All these things seem to be like a must have thing we have to do in life, that everyone is doing, and if we don't do, we seem like to be thought of as failures, or we start perceiving ourselves as failures when we lose a job or when we lose our health, when the truth is these are actually parts of our life, aspects of our living that are actually normal aspects of living. If you look at spirituality, in all spiritual practices, um, there's always this teaching, especially if you have looked into some teachings of Buddhism. It talks about how to accept whatever good and bad that happens in life. In both Hinduism and Buddhism, they teach this principle where we are always constantly taught to strive towards being equanimous about whatever good or bad that's unfolding. Unfortunately, for many of us, including me, I also have phases in life where certain things, when they go really bad, I cannot take it. And in that journey, also, of the things when they were going really bad that I can't handle or I feel like a failure, I have had phases where I have finally realized that certain things are things you shouldn't be taking, and certain things are things that you have to be equanimous about, because both applies in life and both are key important factors for us to lead a balanced and healthy life. So when for me, like, let me talk about my personal life, and from that I hope what I'm trying to explain will become clearer. When I was in my early 20s, I left India and went to US for graduate studies. Now, when you are in a foreign country, in the first year, everything is new, everything looks magical because you are in a new country, learning about a new culture, making new friends. So, everything is very rosy in the first few years of your life in US. But while you're in that first few years of life in a different country, you are also a student there. Because you're a student there, and because I was a graduate student who went there on a scholarship, you have a greater obligation to do well in your studies, otherwise your scholarship will go away. Though that was a factor that should influence my living in US or working in US as a graduate student. Fortunately or unfortunately, whatever was transpiring in my life, in my personal life at that time, led me to not focus so much on just the financial aspects. I was grateful that I had got the scholarship. Without the scholarship, I wouldn't have gone abroad, because my dad had always said to us that I'm not going to spend a lot of money in your education. If you want to go to US, you have to. I didn't have aspirations as such about going and studying in US when I was doing my final years, but because I was in the top Institute of Chemical Technology in India, I was doing a Bachelor of Pharmacy from that institute in Mumbai. Many students from our institute used to go to US. At least a third of my class left for US after the final year. They were very aspirational students, their families were into all these things, and most of those students also came from some upper middle class or elite families, and if not upper middle class, average middle class families. But many of these, one third of my class students had applied even in the final year, before final year, for US, so that as soon as they graduated they would leave for US. And I had no thoughts of doing that at that time, because I was a very ordinary average girl from a very average family in India, and my family didn't even care whether I'm pursuing excellent studies. They wanted me to do good in studies, they didn't want me to fail in studies, but they wouldn't have cared if I had succeeded so much in anything in life. And this is not something I realized when I was in my 20s, it's something I eventually realized in my 30s and 40s. But even though I didn't realize it, when something is a fact, it always remains a fact. So, as girls' education was important to them, considering that they all were socially conscious in my family that girls should be educated. But beyond that, how a girl uses her education in life was not given that much of an importance in my family. Most of my father's side of family, women who were educated, some didn't even get to cross more than their bachelors. Many didn't even have, some of them didn't even have bachelor's degrees, and they all got married in their teens also. Some of them, those who didn't have any degrees after 12th standard, there were many who didn't even cross 12th standard. Some of them were my mother's generation or my grandmother's generation. But despite that, this was the status of the women in the family, that your purpose was served more. You were given some education, but more than the education, most of the women got married in their teens or 20s, which my family also tried to do that to me. They asked me in my 20s, when I was finishing my graduation, whether I would want to get married, and I said no, I want to first earn some money before I get married. So that was what was going on with me, that I clarified with my mother. But whatever I clarified with my mother, I don't know whether it got communicated to my father or whatever else was transpiring in my life at that time. For me, it seemed like I was leading a normal, average Indian girl's life. So, after graduation, though, I was not sure what I should do, but there was a friend of mine who was younger than me, and she wanted to pursue similar US lifestyle goals like many of the other students that my generation had already done. So, one of my classmates from school days, who I hadn't even interacted for 8-10 years of my life, but we used to live in the same building. So because he was a guy, and in India people are a little conservative about girls and guys interacting with each other in teen years or in their early 20s, this girl didn't want to just go to that guy's home by herself because she didn't know him directly. And because he was my former classmate, and she wanted to know how to apply to US from him, because she had heard this guy was going to US after graduation from the final year. So we went to ask him. I went for the sake of my friend to ask this guy what are the steps he took to apply for US education. And after getting some guidance from him, there was another friend of ours who was the same age as me, who had also graduated, and she was also wondering whether she should apply for US studies. So both of us and this girl who was in her final year, all three of us decided that let's try this path as well. So we all three did this path. My friend who was younger than me, even though we got the information from this guy about how to go about the process, after that, with that friend, I didn't discuss much about her application process. But my other friend, who was the same age as me, sometimes we shared a little bit of our educational materials. Like if we had some CDs, we shared some CDs with each other about the GRE testing and things like that. So why am I telling all this? I'm telling all this because I wanted to show that this is how life of some ordinary students are, people who are possibly average students, people who don't always plan out the next stages ahead in life. Like as soon as I go and get my finals done, I will go to US, was the plan of my younger friend as well as my own classmates who were already going to leave for US as soon as they got their final year results. While they were doing all that, I was just barely starting to figure out what to do about it. There was another factor going on behind the scenes while this was happening, which was my mother's death that happened 1 year before, during the beginning of my final year. So I was actually also going through the grief of losing my mother. So I had zero clue. I was not planning anything. Apart from this, I also had some other friends who wanted to do MBA. So along with those friends, I also went to MBA classes while I was studying for GRE. So while I was doing all this, I was studying for GRE, I was going to MBA. I had actually begun going to MBA classes during my final year with those friends, but I never gave the MBA exam during the final year because when my mother died at that time, all of these things went out the door, and I decided I will postpone giving the MBA exam, and I didn't give my MBA exam in final year. So I had some study material from those MBA classes of 1 year back, which I used for a little bit for GRE, but most of the GRE studies I did using my GRE coursework book. Anyways, so after all this, when I went to US, I was still grieving. I went to US 1 year after my final year. So in that one final year of when my mother was not there, when I had already graduated, when I didn't know what my future was going to be, what are the three paths that are available to a girl like me is that you either get a job, or if I'm in my early 20s, considering how my family life was, I would have otherwise got married. And the third thing was this option of doing either a MBA or a higher studies, which is what all average middle class educated girls in my generation from the city where I lived in used to do. So when I went to US, that's why, though I knew that with the scholarship, money only, I can live in US, even though I knew that in the background, when I finally gave my prelims in US, I failed those prelims. Because though the financial pressure was there, though I knew that if I fail these prelims, I would likely have to go back to India or think of some other alternative. Whatever was going on in my life at that time while I was giving these qualifier exams for the PhD program, all of it influenced me so much that I wasn't able to clear my qualifiers. And I could see that I didn't even have that questioning way of looking at research work that is needed from a research worker while doing the PhD program. And the third thing that was influencing me was I was a pharmacology student, so I had to dissect animals, I had to kill animals, I had to feed animals, inject animals. All this animal research work was also causing a lot of trouble to my consciousness because I was a very sensitive person, and even during my pharmacy days in India, in the labs where we had to dissect a frog for some experiment, there at least for a whole class of 30 students, 2 frogs were dissected. So I didn't have to do any individual dissections or experiments. But even there, when the frogs were being killed, or when the smell of the blood was coming, I had one day when I was like literally going to faint in my class from the smell of the blood, from the way the frog was dissected. I got traumatized because the technician banged the frog to kill it, and that was so gruesome, so cruel. I couldn't take it. Same way, when I was doing my own experiments, I had to kill these rats. I didn't enjoy it. That's why I realized that choosing pharmacology at that time was not a great choice. So while this is going on in the background, plus some personal life problems are going on, what happened? I failed the qualifiers and I felt like a failure. For one whole year, it took me to get out of that failure zone. And in that 1 year, the first few months were really distressful for me, because in those first 2 months after failure, other things also were happening in my personal life. Everything combined, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because my scholarship went away. I didn't know whether I should stay in US. I didn't know whether I should come back to India. If I came back to India, I knew I would either have to get married or find a job now, because they did allow me to. They said they will give me a few months or a year to finish into a master's degree instead of a PhD. So I would get a degree out of it, but I would not get the PhD degree that I had gone there to US for. So all these worries, all these things are going on. And in the background, because I'm in my early 20s, every girl gets to go through this, that they have to get married, which is a typical Indian girl's life when they are in their early 20s or in their 20s. So at that time, when I came back to India after failing the prelims, I had failed the prelims. I finished my master's thesis presentation, and the project that the professor had sketched out for me. I had finished that part, but I hadn't submitted my thesis. And at that time, I came to India for a vacation. And I felt even more like a failure when some of my friends were going to get married. They had great jobs. They were doing well in life. Another friend had gone, that girl who was younger than me, she had now gone to the US and she was doing great in her PhD program. So every one of my friend was doing something fabulous, and I was doing, according to me, nothing great. I felt so ashamed, I felt so bad, and I didn't know what to say to any of them or what to express to any of them. And plus, combined with the fact that I had a mom who had died, I really didn't have, and my family is not the kind who speaks a lot. So I had no outlet, no people to talk about what I was going through. And this thing has continued in my life for 20 years now. So for over 20 years, I've had no one to actually deeply talk about what's been going on in my life. And that's why I'm making these videos, because there are many kids like me who do have these kind of families where people don't speak, who do have these failure-like experiences in their life, who feel crappy about their life for whatever reasons, and they have no avenues to speak about. And that's why I'm making this video, because even if you don't have any avenues to speak about, you have to find an avenue to either speak about it or express what you're going through. Otherwise, you will have some kind of meltdown eventually later on in life, which is what happened to me. So if you don't want to have those meltdowns, or if you don't want your life to completely crash at a later stage in life, it's better actually if your life crashes at small degrees of crashing. And which is what was happening with me. My life was slowly crashing in a way where no one understood that I was crashing and failing and feeling like this, or no one cared to understand that that was happening. But I had to understand, right? Because if I have to survive in life, live through a experience of life, even if other people don't understand it, even if other people are not interested in knowing about it or helping with it, you have to find your own coping mechanisms. So what was my first coping mechanism? The first coping mechanism was when I went back to US. I did have a gap of time where after my vacation in India I went back, and I had this time where my professor, at that time I felt it was very unlucky. He was trying to make me write my thesis in as best way as possible because I was his second graduate student. So he had until then only two graduate students, one who was going to finish a PhD by then, who was a couple of years older and senior to me in that college, university. And I was his second student who was not going to finish a PhD, but I was still going to write a thesis with him. So that's why this professor, when you are a new student to a professor, they are going to be even more dedicated and more invested in making sure what you write in your thesis looks good for them, right? So this professor was very particular, so he started like wanting me to put really good effort in writing a long thesis and a quality thesis according to his perception. So, and I was doing whatever he was asking me to do according to his perception. And while I was doing that, he took time to like say I would submit him whatever he suggested, write this and change it and give it to me. I would give it to him. Then he would take about a couple of weeks to get back to me with the feedback of what edits he wants. And like this back and forth kept happening once a month. And that was, at that time I felt it was a very bad thing because my my master's kept dragging on for months. But now I realize that was a grace from God. It was a blessing. And the saying, rejection is God's protection. This is exactly what what was happening with me. He kept rejecting what I was submitting to him because it wasn't quality work, because it wasn't up to his standards. And luckily, because he was kept keeping on rejecting this thesis related work, in the background, what am I getting? Though I don't have people to vent out to, though I don't have people to talk to, that I'm going through this life challenge, I don't know where my future is going to be next. I don't know if I should again, after this PhD after this thesis is completed, this master's is done, should I stay in India, should I leave, should I stay in US, should I go back to India, should I go back to a family where everyone is successful while I am a failure, should I feel like a failure, what do I do? All these things are going on internally with me. I'm not expressing it to anyone, but they are going on in my heart and my mind. So while that's going on in my heart and my mind, I was also dating someone who was very crappy with me, who didn't ever ask what was going on in my life. So that was also impacting my health. So there were many things that were impacting my emotional health. I felt I wasn't suicidal, but I was very depressed at that time. And this failure was really like I had never failed in life before that. So for me, it was a shocker also that I failed. But at the same time, there were couple of students who also failed their prelims. Every one of the other students who failed went through a different track. One student who failed decided to apply to other universities. She finally managed to get into a different university to finish her PhD. There was another student, a few other students who failed. One got, their professor told them to redo the prelims. So they redid the prelims and they were able to pass. There was another student who also failed. They didn't get a chance to redo the prelims, but their department said if you find another professor who would allow you to, that student just went and talked to other professors, I think, and they decided that if they failed the prelims, then after for 1 year another professor took him up as a student and told him that if you do well in my lab, again apply for the PhD program from my lab. So that's how they stayed in the same PhD program, but they got 1 year gap to redo everything. So everyone got a different path. So out of this, the one who had failed and had to go to a different university, like that, I also applied to some other universities again. But see, PhD was likely not the best path given my personality and given my life circumstances, because of which the PhD path didn't work out. Then I also applied to different labs as lab technician just to make money, because I'm not made of money. I came from an average middle class. My father never invested in any money when I was in US. So everything, my living costs in US was completely paid for by my tuition related fees. Whatever scholarship I had in my PhD program, those 2 years of scholarship that I got from my university, that was sustaining my life in US. So I had to have a job. If I don't have a job, I can't live in US anymore. So I started looking for a job, and eventually, even though the lab technician work didn't pan out, I got a job in the same universities. Had a early childhood education center for preschool students from 2 to 5 years of age. So I went and worked there as a teaching aide, and I got that job. And that job again was another breaker, that again the rejection from not doing a PhD program again, or the rejection from not being able to work in a biology or chemistry or research work based lab, that rejection ended up helping me when I worked in a preschool. Because what happened, I learned to interact with small American children. I learned to interact with foreign children also, because many of these children were foreigners like me. And that's why I likely got a job, because there were many, maybe like a fifth of the students in that school group had some Asian or other heritage. So, because of which I might have been selected. I don't know. But whatever the reason was for me getting selected for this position, it helped me. I learned how to interact with kids. I learned how to interact with Americans, because when I was working in labs, and though I was interacting with Americans in my research work, because my lab was a smaller lab, I didn't interact that much with people. And this has always been my life trajectory. My circle of people I interact with in my daily life, in professional life or personal life, has always been a small circle. So in this preschool setting, I got a larger circle to interact with. Again, in this preschool setting also, it so happened that while I was interacting with the children initially, later on in the later half of my work experience, I got to do more work in the kitchen, and which was also another great thing, because I learned about nutrition from there, the same nutritional things that are applicable for my later work. I also got to understand the American system of doing certain operational things, all of which was beneficial for my next job, which was what? Which was that during this time that the professor was taking time to approve my thesis, during the time I was working with these preschool kids, or working in the kitchen of a preschool, and I was getting some skills there. The same skills that I gained in this preschool setting was helpful for my next job, which is nothing to do with preschool, but which was again back to do with my bachelor's degrees and master's degree, which was a job of a pharmacist. And in order to become a pharmacist in US, any foreign pharmacist from another country has some steps they have to follow. I followed those steps. I passed those exams, and after passing those exams and clearing some interviews, I got a job as a retail pharmacist, where again I have to speak to a large number of American audience, where I have to communicate and do some operational workflow related work, all of which was again beneficial for me, based on what I had done in my research work, as well as what I was doing in the preschool. So this is how, when you have a failure and you don't know where the failure is leading you, but this is how sometimes failures can lead you towards a next step and a next step that maybe you didn't plan, because not everyone has to be a planner in life. Some people are very goal setting planners who keep planning, like, this is what I want in my life, this is what I want to manifest, and there's nothing wrong with having that kind of mindset. But even without me having that type of a mindset that I will do this next, this next, this next, my life always kept shaping up in the way that was best aligned with my personality, best aligned with my needs, best aligned with what would align with my current stage in life. That's why I want to tell people who have been failing in life, who have been feeling like failures, who have been feeling depressed, who have had job loss, who have had health crises, who have had family health crises, all of which can impact our health, our financial health, our social health, our work life, and our work output. So when your work output is not at a optimal, don't compete with the person whose life has many blessings in them, because there's no point first of all in comparing yourself to someone whose life is always in a upflow, or who's going next stage of good, doing better than you always. Because even though they might be doing better in something, and even though at that point of time you might not be doing better at something, eventually if you do the things that are aligned with you, aligned with your life circumstances, aligned with your health circumstances, you will eventually come to those revelations of different stages that later on in life, in introspection, you will see they were all connected. And I will join the dots of my career progress in my next video. This video is already 30 minutes long, and there's some disturbance in the background, and I apologize for that. But this is a long life story. I'm telling you a story of my life from 25 years back. So 25 years back, this is what happened in my life. But this is just the beginning stage of the failures I have faced in life. But this was the first major failure, or two major failures were present here. But I will talk about the other failure later on. But in this failure, just related to career related failure only, there were two minor degree failures, which turned into a major success when I started working as a pharmacist eventually. And when I was working as a pharmacist, there were many of my friends who didn't have that higher salary that I had as a pharmacist. And they again got a little bit envious about the fact that I'm getting a high salary as a pharmacist, which again they had nothing to be envious about, because right now they are in much greater positions than I am at this point of life. So this earning related comparisons people do, the education related comparisons people do, the marital status related or social status related comparisons that we do in life, if you let those things impact you too much, it doesn't serve any purpose or meaningful purpose. You should allow a failure to help you move forward in life, but you shouldn't allow the fact that you failed at something, or you are getting less pay than someone else, or you're not getting the job that's aligned with you currently, but you wish to get some current alignment with a better paying job or something. Whatever you're aspiring for in life, that will happen to you. But for each good thing to unfold in your life, sometimes some bad things also unfold in life, which is what I was talking about when I was talking about Buddhist principles, because ups and downs are always part and parcel of life. Sometimes some people will go up for many years, 10-20 years they will go up, but then their downfall might come. Or in one lifetime, if they had gained enough social credit from a past life, they might also be doing well throughout that entire 60-70 years or 80 years of their life. But whatever they were doing in that 60-70-80 years, where everything was going good for them, maybe materially or financially, life is also not simply about materialism and financial things. And that's why going up and down shouldn't impact you as much, or when it impacts you, the best way to get out of it is to remember, because it is normal and natural if you fail to feel bad about it. But what is not normal and natural is if you get stuck in the failure of it and not realize that out of the failure also something was supposed to materialize for you. That thing wouldn't materialize for you if you hadn't failed. because if I hadn't failed, I would have been a PhD student. I would have gone in a very different track, a track which I wouldn't have enjoyed, because I was killing animals, working on animals, experimenting on animals. So socially conscious wise, it was not the best track for me. At that time, there were not any avenues for doing some different kind of research work, or maybe if those avenues were available, I was not consciously aware about it. That's why, even though maybe there was some research work where you don't have to kill so many animals, because I didn't get to choose that path, the path that was available to me was not aligning with me. So universe naturally decided to fail me, which was a very great thing for the future two things. Because that 1 year I spent in the preschool working with those kids, I love those toddler age stages of kids. So when I was with those toddlers, I felt so happy when they would do their paint work, artwork, read books for their stories. All those things used to make me happy. Even the food they used to eat, because I was a poor person at that time. I was a minimum wage person in US at that time, and in that minimum wage time, I didn't used to always have money for buying groceries. And because the preschool used to provide food to the children, half my eating, my breakfast and lunch was from the preschool. And dinner, there were many days I skipped dinner, there were many days I ate dinner from whatever money I did have from this job. But many a times I only used to eat breakfast and lunch, and sometimes if I was in that preschool during the evening time also, occasionally, not always, I would also sometimes get their afternoon snack, the snack which was like biscuit and milk. But I sustained myself using these preschool food, which were much healthier than the normal adult food also that I was eating, because having access to milk daily is not something I would otherwise think about. But that milk was beneficial for me because it was really good quality milk. Whereas I, as a poor student, a minimum wage worker, when I would go and buy some milk from the store, I would buy the cheapest milk, because I was a low minimum wage person at that time. So instead of buying the cheapest milk, they were getting good quality milk, which I was getting access to, because not every day every student used to come in that facility. And because every day every student didn't used to come, sometimes you would have leftover milk that I would have to otherwise throw away. So instead of throwing it away, most of the time teachers would finish up the milk. Or sometimes we would give the extra milk to the kids also if they wanted extra milk. But most of the time kids are also getting good well-fed meals, so for them also it would be overfeeding if we would give them too much of the extra food. So most of the time, any of the extra food of the kids who didn't come to school that day, because they were preschool kids, many a times their parents would keep them at home and not send them to school. So anyways, so this 1 year of good healthy food I got, even though I was a minimum wage worker, and eating this healthy food while writing my thesis also helped me get good brain strength. Because if you have good nutrition, you are good in studies, and then if you are good in studies, then I passed the exams that I needed to pass to become a pharmacist next. And then I had, as I said, each of the failures led to something that was beneficial for the next stage. And even in this preschool experience, the operational experience that I gained helped me in becoming more operationally good even in my life as a pharmacist. This preschool experience helped me understand the American culture about kids, helped me understand American food laws, helped me understand about nutrition, what is good nutrition, bad nutrition, because I had to go through food handlers, permit related some steps, which gave me more insight about good quality food, which I would never have gained because my mother had died, because I didn't have any female influences in my life. So see, because the universe knew I didn't have a mother, I got this job. That also was playing a role in, and because I didn't have a mother, I didn't have sisters who would teach me how to cook well. I, in fact, didn't even if those sisters and mothers and aunts would have taught me something, because I worked in a preschool and because they were more stricter about food handling in US, I got a better insight than what I would have got if my mother was alive, or if I had other female normal Indian influences in my life. So that also became beneficial for me. So see, every time you have some failure, some sadness, some grief, universe will bring up a compensation for you. You just don't realize that that was the compensation at the time. I didn't realize until today about this cooking related thing. It had seeped into my psyche, the benefit of it, but verbalizing it has finally happened to me now, almost 20 years later, after I have even quit that job. So this is how failures are. After failures, whatever good thing that next happens to you in life, even at that time, if you don't understand the blessing of it, sometime eventually in the future, you will always realize the blessing related to the failure that happened and the next things that unfolded after that failure. So I hope this video was insightful, and if you have any questions, please drop a comment. Thank you.